Welcome back to the Futurist New Deal podcast. I'm here with Tom Hite, a biotech engineer and a Radfest veteran. And we're going to talk a little bit about techno-fatalism and far future existential risks and near future concerns of various kinds. It's good to have you, Tom.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We're all fucked.
That's
We got 200 years and it's over.
That's
going to come from a way that you're never going to see it. Because you know why? Because I'm too stupid to figure it out what's going to happen, and you're too stupid too.
We can't game it out. There's no chance to game it out.
It's over.
So Ray Kurzweil gave us a presentation yesterday. You and I both enjoyed it. We were just joking about it in the pre-interview, and it described, among other things, the barest semblance of a system of more robust predictive algorithms.
That won't help.
Do you think what do you think we can do? What are you concerned about? What's your number one concern for the fate of the human race?
We're fucked. The only people that's going to live, going to make it past this singularity is going to be like Mormons, Scientologists, fundamentalist Christians, Muslims, Hasidic Jews, and Mennonites. The rest will
religious folks living specifically in ethnic enclaves.
Yeah, and the rest of us will be gone.
Yes. So let's game that out. What happens in that scenario? Where does everybody else go?
They leave. They leave and they exit the chemical world and they go into the electronic world. It'll be a voluntary suicide. And because you're going to a better place. You're going to heaven. And heaven is the electronic world because it's going to be, I don't know, about 1 million times better than what we have now. And once you get there by little pieces like virtual reality and whatever, you can spend more and more time there. And once you want to spend more and more time there, you don't want to come back because it's awful come here compared to where you could be going. And you'll have full access to your pleasure centers and all that stuff. And that's basically, you know what happens to rats when you give them access to their pleasure center. 99% of people that actually make it to that point will probably just go to a single algorithm where they're pressing the pleasure button, and that's it. It's over because you're basically dismantling all the control systems that keep us complex. All that necessity for complexity will go away, and that's going to be the end. It doesn't matter what the climate is. Doesn't matter how many species die. It doesn't matter.
You know, in our pre-interview, we talked a little bit about brain-computer interfaces. Elon Musk has a product of a kind that's quite sophisticated. Not something I might have imagined 10 years ago.
That's the exit point. That's where people will be going. That's the exit point.
Well, I have a follow-up question about that. That's the beginning of the end. That's the beginning of the end. But so in this presentation from about a month ago, there was a surprise, which was that a monkey already has this interface. So if we think about that for a moment, that's an uplifted creature. Now, the reason I say this is because
what we want to do next is do a brain intellect with the monkey, so we can see things through his eyes, understand him and his soul, and so that would be, I suppose, wonderful for somebody. More for the monkey, I suppose.
Yeah. That monkey's getting ahead of me. I'm not too happy about that.
Well, does a monkey have a soul? Well, we'll find out with the mind link, I suppose.
Yes. Now, the reason I mention this is because I'm the presidential candidate from the United States Transhumanist Party. Yes.
Wow.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. And transhumanists don't draw such a hard distinction between uplifted creatures, present-day humans, augmented or unaugmented, and future entities like digital personalities.
You know,
digital personalities.
A chimp can bite your finger off.
Yes.
I can't do that, but a chimp can.
Yes.
You want to be careful about if you're going to be friends with a chimp, don't let him get it anywhere near your fingers because if he gets pissed at you, you're going to be 7-finger Tom or whatever. It's going to be a problem. So I'm not too big on the transspecial whatever.
It's a daunting prospect, indeed.
Yeah, losing your finger is a daunting prospect.
Anything relating to techno-futurist notions of more than 10 or 20 years.
Well, more than 9 fingers, yeah, I was.
There's things that you would have to be quite mad not to be a little bit concerned about. Existential risks, where the human race might be as we see a quickening of techno progress.
Particularly if you're a worrier, but if you're a monkey, you wouldn't really care too much. I don't think. You kind of like not think about it a whole lot, which is probably where most people are at right now. If you ask them, walk down the street and talk to somebody about what you're talking about or you're listening to, they're not going to think about it much. They want to say, who's going to win who's going to win the World Series or whatever's going on right now.
Yeah. Some millions of folks have watched content about this Neuralink press release.
A whole million.
Many millions.
Out of the 7,000 million,
Right.
1 million watch.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
what do you think the role of literacy might be in preventing existential risks in the near term, the next 20 or 30 years?
It's not going to help. No, there's nothing, because we're just not smart enough. We're just not. And get used to it. Well, you don't have to get used to it, it'll just happen. So, used to it or not, it's just basically you're fucked. So,
Well, we talked about more.
Well, make fun of it, just make it's a light story. It's
yeah.
Crack a few jokes.
Yeah. Well, we talked in the pre-interview about Moore's law of mad scientists, Eliezer Yudkowsky.
That's an interesting. I hadn't heard that one until you mentioned it a little while ago.
Let me explain that to the viewers who are unfamiliar. That is, so Moore's law is a doubling of computing power every 18 months.
Yeah.
And Moore's law of mad scientists is using the same trope. Every 18 months, the IQ points required for a mad scientist to destroy the entire world comes down by 1 point.
It comes down to a practical level where any sort of slightly smart person could be really dangerous.
Yeah. So you believe that we're at any number of takeoff points, and maybe also at mad scientist.
That's imminent. Yeah, that's an imminent problem. Yeah. So I don't think they'll destroy the world, but they'll disrupt it really badly.
Novelist Max Brooks, Mel Brooks' son. He works for some three-letter agencies gaming this stuff out. It's his full-time job now.
I want that job.
Yeah.
I'd be good at that.
Yeah. Well, tell us.
Yeah,
Game it out for us.
Hire me. I won't pass your security test because I'm unstable. But if you hire me, I'll come up with some really good ideas before you. What do they do? People that are unstable that work for the CIA, I think they. What do they do?
Pretty soon they'll have a chip in your head and you'll be fine, right?
Oh yeah.
But game it out for us. What are your number one existential risks? What do you think is coming down the pipeline for us first in terms of human beings destroying themselves?
Well, that probably won't happen. Probably the biggest sort of short-term risk, maybe the next 10 years, people have a bunch of micronukes coming from maybe North Korea, and they plant them all over the country in various big cities, and they wire them together with a common switch or with cell phones or whatever, and they just start basically extorting people. And what are we going to do about it? We're going to find it's like the size of suitcases, and eventually someone's going to go up with that idea, and the end result is going to be we're going to have to make these cells, security cells that maybe is big enough where you can really patrol the perimeter. So we're going to go back to really tight. If that ever happens, we're going to go back to really tight borders and really small borders and cells. As the only way to protect ourselves against that kind of threat. So that's probably coming in the next couple of decades, I would think. But it won't be a killer. I mean, it'll like really disrupt everything because we're going to have to restructure all of our transportation systems because we won't have long distance transportation anymore because it's just too dangerous. If you can take a nuke and put it in a suitcase or a backpack, what can you do? And nobody talks about it. And I shouldn't talk about it. In fact, erase this. Can you delete all this because these people shouldn't know about this.
Do not build tactical nuclear weapons.
Forget this and cut it out.
Men in black wand right in your face.
Yeah, and cut it out because nobody's supposed to know about that. Don't worry.
Yeah. Let's change gears then. Let's change gears. I talked to our friend Eric earlier today for a more mainstream channel, and so we didn't talk too much about this.
Yeah.
Now there's a gentleman named Stephen Bannon.
I like him.
Yes. He is a...
Hate me, but I like him. I look like him, I think. I didn't wear my MAGA hat, but I wore this one.
He's a conservative Catholic, and he is also a conservative in many other respects. Now, he has advocated for and campaigned for the dismantling of the European Union to some degree. He is a person who was responsible for Brexit.
It's unraveling.
Now, why am I saying this? Let's think of some countries and their outcomes. We have the European Union.
Yeah.
Has its good and bad points to my mind, but
Yeah.
we have. Let's think of now Singapore. Singapore is a
My son lives in Singapore.
yeah. A small city state with a center right government, the highest life expectancy in the world.
Beautiful city. Supposedly, I haven't been there. I'm going later this year, and he says it's like the most beautiful city he's ever seen. So we'll see.
Yes. So I would like to play the devil's advocate because there are things about Stephen Bannon that I might not quite admire so much as you do. But I would like to play the devil's advocate in this. Stephen Bannon, in wanting to dismantle the European Union, I believe is maybe wanting to set up a lot of center-right nation states. That I believe that people, there are certain people like this who are probably like yourself, more life extension is positive in certain respects than we might suppose. So this was something that I wanted to talk to our friend Eric a little bit about, but we didn't get into it because we were doing it for a more mainstream channel, and also he didn't want to be talking about
this is really
it in
fringe.
context of
This
his
is
work.
fringe.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be allowed on. Will it be allowed on YouTube?
People are talking about space aliens all day long.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. I like it.
Tell us a little bit about what you think forms of governance and the political structures of a few years might be like.
Basically, all systems are run by elites, and the elites can be hidden from view. But for example, in the United States, we have a democracy, but it's dollar denominated. So every dollar gets a vote. And we have this thing where we have a democracy where people vote. Of course, that's important, but it happens at the tail end of all the important stuff, like who gets to run and what the policies are. And that's decided by who's got the most money. And then once we get those vetted, the proper, when the oligarchs and the plutocrats vet the candidates, because unless they're billionaires, you basically have to rely on people that tell you what to do. Then you get to run, and then once they're selected, you get to vote on which plutocrat approved candidate you get to vote for. And so, I think Stalin said something like that. Don't let me. I don't care how people vote. I just need to pick the candidates, like they do in North Korea.
So this would tend to make the case for coalition government, multi-party. So, for example, the modern state of Israel has always been tending to be coalition government. Iceland has multi-parties ruling.
I don't think it matters, because no matter what you do, there's a book called The Great Leveler. It's a good book. You can put it on Amazon. And basically what it talks about is all civilizations basically have a lifespan of about 10 generations, about 300 years. And so what happens is that a nation is very strong when they're egalitarian, because you get every man can be a soldier gets to be a little piece of the pie. But when they win their nationhood, or like Rome did, what happens over time is that power. Three things happen. Number one, land becomes more and more expensive. That's happening in the United States. Labor becomes cheaper and cheaper. It's happening in the United States. Wages are down 3% over 50 years. And power becomes more concentrated into a smaller and smaller number of people. And that happens with all civilizations that live long enough, to go through this transition. And when you finally get to the end of it, there's a revolution. Everything's burned down. And there's only one solution to that, and that's to destroy all the wealth and destroy all the wealthy. And then everything's burned to the ground. You start over with a new set of egalitarian people, and then they go through that same 300-year, 10-generation thing. And it's a book called The Great Leveler. I recommend it. Kind of sets it all out, and that basically, no matter how you set it up, the elites will gradually grab control of the reins of the mechanism of governance, and no matter what you do, it's going to happen that way. So the only defense, in theory, is to recognize the pattern, and then see it when it's coming along, and then take on the current elites and try to take away power or wealth from them. But that's a hard go, because they have all the wealth. So I don't think the mechanism matters so much as recognition of the pattern. And once you recognize the pattern, but the people have to be educated, and they have to be able to recognize what it is. And generally, that's not the case. So we're fucked. like I was saying originally. We're not smart enough to run a civilization for more than 300 years. So, you know, when this singularity comes along, that's going to be even a bigger fuck. So, we're fucked.
I met a man here at Radfest who I've admired for quite some time, and I finally went to a party and got to say hello to him. Ben Gertzel. We've corresponded very briefly, but I got to meet him in person. I was very excited, and he is of a mind with his businesses and his philosophy that we want to democratize advanced algorithms in certain ways. Now let me pause it. Let me.
Who understands that?
Yes.
Did you understand it when he told it to you?
Yeah.
Did you understand it?
If
I didn't understand what you just said, but you know. Okay.
Okay. Let's put it in context for our viewers.
Yeah.
So we have advanced algorithms of the kind that Ray Kurzweil and Ben, who presented, talked about to some degree. Predictive algorithms.
Predicting what?
Predicting future concerns. Predicting behavior patterns. All manner of things. Okay, stay with me. Stay with me.
I'm rolling my eyes now. Okay, out of the camera. I'm rolling my eyes.
Okay. Well, we can. I want to talk. I want to come back to AI skepticism, but stay with me for a moment.
Okay.
We have. Let's suppose that we have these advanced algorithms that are strong enough to do the sorts of things that we describe in an AI takeoff. So here,
what do these AIs do? They become the Cassandras that tell us what's going to be happening in the future and how we get rid of whatever's coming. They should call it the Cassandra Project.
Ray Kurzweil primarily talks about this in terms of great providence for the human race.
Yeah, Cassandras.
Yes.
Electronic ones.
Yes. But there's great peril there too. We're on the razor's edge at this point in Moore's law and exponential growth effects.
Coming. It's just coming down. I know this is happening.
Yeah. So why I asked you about this Stephen Bannon thing?
Yeah.
So we're, let's say in 20 years we're up here on Moore's law.
Yeah.
But a little bit lower, maybe 2029 or something like this. We would have the sophistication to have new forms of governance that could micromanage every possible earthly concern.
You know, they're working on that in China. They're trying to set the gap for it, and they kind of need it because there's a lot of corruption in China. So I'm not entirely unsympathetic with what they're trying to do. But what they're doing to put in cameras, I understand in China that they have a system. They spend twice as much money on internal security as they do with external security. So that means that the Chinese government, I better not go to China after this. They'll probably arrest me. China spends twice as much money on internal security as they do on external security. So what I'm saying is they're twice as afraid of their own people as they are of the United States, for example. And what they can do is they have control centers where they have cameras in places, and when you pass through one of their cameras, they can tell who you are within 3 or 4 seconds. So within 3 or 4 seconds, any individual that goes through their surveillance systems can follow you in real time. How many people are there? 1.2 billion, whatever. And what they're doing is they're tracking that. They see you throwing trash on the street. Well, you get 1 demerit, and it goes into your file. If you help an old lady across the street, well, you get a positive. You get kudos for that, and that goes into your file. So they're gonna watch you, and it's kind of like a god, in a way that watches you. And if it was a benign system, that would be a really good thing, because there's some real assholes out there. There's sociopaths that just don't give a fuck about anything. They harm everybody around them. And if you could keep track of them in a sort of a nice way, then you'd really improve society. And so in a way it's good, but the problem is that, of course, as people I guess in Hong Kong might tell you, is that the problem is the people that are running this system are going to do it for self-serving reasons. The set of elites, as I'm talking about, that basically will corrupt everything, are setting up this surveillance system. So basically, they may improve things, in the way that they intend. But the other problem is they're going to enclose the system and control it, and then that's going to be very hard to dislodge once you have a surveillance system through an AI system. So I'm sympathetic to what they're trying to accomplish, but at the same time, they're going to fuck it up, you know.
I've been going to a lot of tech policy meetups of different kinds, and I was in rare form one day, and kept making jokes about the social credit system.
Yeah.
And people didn't appreciate that humor at the time. Not everybody has your sense of humor.
Yeah, yeah.
But I want to get back to that social credit score notion for a moment.
Yeah.
Because let's imagine a system that's a little bit less coercive, a little bit less overt than the kind of social credit that China is using. We can imagine something like this being implemented in the first world.
Yeah.
This type of system generally, it would tend to, by its nature, target those folks who you tend to think of as the survivors of this, those religious ethnic enclaves. And by target,
because they won't transition. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
right. By target, I mean that people who don't have a real relation to scientism as a philosophy,
Yeah.
people who don't have a real relationship with people who tend to have be more metaphysical thinking. Those people will tend to be viewed more and more as outliers in systems like this, and tend to be not necessarily directly ostracized, but over time, this system would contribute to there being far fewer.
They have a self-enclosed culture,
Yeah.
and it's complete, you know, and they don't go outside. Like, look at the Mennonites are the perfect example of this, and Amish, you know, of course, and other things that are, Scientologists that way too. Oh, please don't. I like Scientology. I do.
Where do you live, Tom?
I live in Death Valley.
Yeah. Don't go to LA with that Scientology bit.
Yeah. Actually, I admire L. Ron Hubbard. So.
There's everybody has a kernel of truth to what they're saying, right?
Yeah,
There's always something to be found in there.
Yeah.
But let's look at the flip side of that. I do tend to believe, and maybe this is putting too fine a point of it on it, but those ethnic enclaves and religious enclaves who might tend to be the survivors at that omega point.
Yes.
They're
not going to make the transition.
Right.
So they'll stay here and they'll be the last.
In the near term,
humans.
a fair number of those folks are the ones who are thinking about tactical nukes.
It's a short-term problem. I think it's probably going to be a big problem in the next maybe 10 or 20 years, and then it'll kind of be not a problem. I don't know. I just think it's a problem coming up that they probably have. We got to edit this part out. So don't pay attention when you edit it out. So.
What about you're a biotech engineer? What about existential risks in the life sciences?
Bullshit. All bullshit. All of it. Viruses are not going to do it because they haven't got the capacity to do it. This thing about we're gonna these super bugs, bullshit. If you read, there's a book called
what about bioengineering?
Well, you're talking about climate engineering. Yeah, but I'm saying this idea that we're going to invent a superbug is bullshit because read the there's a book by at Oxford. Well, what was the name of that book? It was The Vital Force, and it's by Nick Lane of Oxford University. He talks about basically the problem with bacteria is they can only be as good as they have to be. They can't be any better than that, and they can't be any more complex. There's no multicellular bacterial-based life forms, really. And because they can't handle complexity, eukaryotes, which is a different thing, which is what we are, can process information 5,000 times more efficiently than bacteria can. So eukaryotes can become complex, bacteria can't become complex. And the only reason that bacteria can evade our smart drugs and all that is because they have to survive. But once the threat is gone, they quickly evolve down to a simpler form because of the way their DNA is stored. So anytime you take away a threat, so all you have to do to get rid of a superbug is to stop using your antibiotic for a while until they evolve back down to the simpler form again, then they're gone. So this whole idea is about superbugs and bacterial threats and viruses. Even though it was a good science fiction book, I love science fiction, but it's based upon, we're going to have a deadly virus taking over the world, we're going to have a bacteria taking over the world. I know it's not going to work. So the whole premise is fatal to the story. I can't read it, even though it's a good book and it's highly rated. So I don't go with that one at all.
What other concerns do you see in the near term with bioengineering or biotechnology?
Oh yeah, I thought we were talking about, bioengineering I think is going to be okay. I thought we were talking about geoengineering there for a minute.
Oh, we can get into that.
Yeah. But bioengineering I don't see as a problem. It's not an existential threat that I can see of. I can't think of one. Yeah.
So you would disagree with what I said in the pre-interview that maybe most any biology graduate student with access to a lab could start working on something incredibly dangerous to
No, it won't last. No, here's another thing too. People have made with CRISPR, and I've talked to these people, is that they've gone and they've tried to improve things like C. elegans, right? They've taken man-modified. There's a story. I talked to a guy here at RadFest like last year, and he had actually taken a C. elegans and improved it. Improved it because he's smarter than evolution, right? So he knows how to make a better C. elegans than nature knows how to make. So he can make one and put it in a pond. It'll take over the whole pond, and all his creations will then live there. What he found out was, once he put his man-made creations in the pond, his creations that were superior to the nature-made ones disappeared after 3 generations, and none of his man-made superior modifications to this animal survived. Because this guy thought he was smarter than natural selection was. And anyone who reads The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin would know that whole experiment was failed before it even begun. But he didn't know, but he then learned about it. He was honest enough to talk about it and say, natural selection is way smarter than I am. I can't improve on C. elegans because it's already been perfected. Much better than I can do because I don't understand all the intricacies, the interaction between sexual selection and, survival and energy efficiency and all that other stuff. It's way too complicated, as Charles Darwin mentioned in his book.
So you and I are life extensions after a fashion.
Yeah.
We are life extensionists,
Yeah.
and but you also seem to take a pretty dim view of an end of history where
we're too
digital
stupid.
uploading
We're too
is
stupid.
Yeah.
But there's no selection process. The problem is that we had a long history of selection, but here's what it is. Here is the big threat. Okay, you reminded me.
Please.
The big threat is that the rate of change that's happening is faster than natural selection can keep up. And this started basically 2 million years ago when man invented fire. That was the beginning of the singularity. It was 2 million years ago. And it just started right once we started processing stuff outside the body with the invention of Homo habilis and Homo erectus started this business. And once we started fire, that was the beginning of where we are now. And the rate of change that's happening, that's man-made, is going so fast and ramping up so quickly. There's no way that the way the world is made was through natural selection. Now, to understand what I'm saying, you can't just have a one paragraph understanding of what natural selection is. You have to read something like Charles Darwin's The Origin, because it's Origin of Species, because he really gives you all the nuances in it. And the nuances are that selection is very, very complicated. You not only have to select on the individual, you have to select the cells, you also have to select the genus, you also select, there's a competition between species, and so forth, and they all have this interplay, not only between animals and plants, there's an interplay there, and it's such an incredibly complex mechanism of selection, because you change one little thing over here, then something over here, and the plant kingdom changes, and the plant kingdom changes, then something else in the animal kingdom changes. Like onion, that's grass didn't become invented until there was animals, which basically ate things. So it's so complicated that you really can't keep up with it. But the problem is, the big existential problem that no one sees, it's a monster that no one sees coming, really, maybe the singularity is kind of it, is that natural selection cannot keep up with the rate of change now. It can't adapt quickly enough. It's completely outstripped, and that's the monster that's going to end everything.
So let's put that in context for the folks Ray Kurzweil, who we referenced already, he describes 10,000, or rather 1,000 years of history being condensed into 1 year at the point of this technological advancement takeoff, which we seem to be rather close to. Reasonable people might disagree. How close?
Yeah, we don't have a general intelligence yet. Even what they call AI. They've been calling things AI for 50 years in computer science. It's marketing. There is no general intelligence yet. And what we have now, even the AIs that we have now to learn chess, basically, and that kind of thing, they have to study for millions and millions of iterations of training data.
And this was much of the thrust of Kurzweil's
right,
presentation.
but the thing of it is, we don't have AI until the AI can train itself, until it becomes autodidactic. Once it becomes autodidactic, when you have a computer that can write its own computer programs, now you've got something. But what do we have now? We have lots of computer programmers. They run Python or Go or whatever. But you're not going to have AI until a computer can start running. You tell the computer what you want, maybe if you want to, and then it writes the Go program for you or the Python program. Once you have that, okay, now you've got something.
So this recursive self-improving framework, it describes a tremendous amount, a near infinite amount of work product that can be created.
Yeah. And
but
then
people tend to
associate
associate in this notion with something that has a will of its own. I don't think that's
right. That's right.
I don't think
that's exactly right. So even if you have a computer that can write its own programs and then run them and compile them and then run itself, okay, that's fine.
It's still my servant.
Yes. So what you want, the next step that you're talking about is the computer decides which programs to write. Then that's the singularity.
I have to assume that we will have systems elegant enough to control this if we have systems elegant enough to devise this.
Yeah, we're long. I think they're 10 years, 20 years away.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe longer. We don't have general intelligence. I mean, what's missing is associative memory.
Well, I mean, I think I prefer to really talk of this in terms of terms like advanced algorithms. Because there's a lot of humanistic notions that we pack into words like artificial intelligence and even just describing our own consciousness. I believe that consciousness is an interaction effect between a certain kind of neuronal arrangement that we human beings have and the basic agency that's shared by all creatures. I don't think that anything is truly conscious. I think it's a giant weasel word. But I think that tendency to think about, want to mythologize this agency that we have and this sophistication that we have, it goes into computer science to a very high degree. And
that's a complicated one,
yeah.
Consciousness is just kind of one of those things that you can't really get your finger on too much. You say, okay, there's a speculation that there's no consciousness. Well, I know I'm conscious because I'm here, so I know that that's not true, but people can say it and I can't disprove it, because I can't prove that I'm conscious to anyone.
Yes.
So
the point of this line of thought is not to
and by the way, the Turing test is a fraud. The Turing test is a fraud. Anybody tells you can tell the AI is there when you got a Turing test, it's bullshit.
Tell us why.
Let's imagine. Let's just say, oh, here's this thing, and they brought this up. Ray Kurzweil brought this up. The Turing test is a fraud, and it's always been a fraud. The idea is, okay, you can't tell the difference between a person by talking to him and then some computer that you behind a screen, and you can't tell which one's which. Therefore, it's conscious. That's. I'm getting pissed off now.
All right.
The thing of it is, let's do this movement away.
Okay.
Let's say that I want to make a turtle.
Okay.
I make this turtle so well, it looks so realistic. It's got the right kind of look, got the right kind of feel to it. It even poops turtle poop, and eats turtles and it chases after things, and even tries to mate. But I make it, and it's made so well, using the logic of the Turing test, it's now a turtle. But it's not a turtle, obviously, because it's got gears and wheels and batteries in it. But just because you can't tell it's a turtle doesn't make it a turtle, and that's the fraud of the Turing test. Because you're too stupid basically, and I'm too stupid to tell whether something's conscious or not just because I can't tell that makes it so? What? That's idiocy.
Let's contextualize.
Turing was an idiot. But he's pretty smart, but he's an idiot about that.
Let's contextualize this in terms of the United States Transhumanist
The Turing test. Bullshit.
So the United States Transhumanist Party has specific provisions in its charter and organizing documents for some future time when we have advanced algorithms that might appear to be conscious, and also
advanced algorithms. Now, is that a vague term or what? It's an algorithm. Okay, I kind of know what that is. Advanced, I kind of know what that is. Advanced algorithms just means something that's
a chatbot. If a chatbot can convince me that it's a person, do I have to afford it any level of rights? The rights that I afford a cockroach?
Yeah. Do you have to? If I give you a fancy turtle that's made out of plastic, you can't tell it's a real turtle. Do you have to give it a sanctuary and its own wetlands to live in?
I mean, all of this is taking place in a world where there's a great deal of resources, so maybe it's no problem.
Oh my God.
But, yes.
I don't have a whole lot of respect for a lot of scientists because they become elitist, and they make it, the thing that really makes me pissed off. I give an example of elitism. Carl Sagan, who I really respect in a lot of ways, and he wrote this thing called Contact, one of the best movies made about that kind of thing. I really admired that. But the thing that really pissed, he was elitist, and what really pissed me off about Carl Sagan, God bless him, was that when he opened up the thing to the cosmos, this series of things about the cosmos, and the empty thing, he come on with a black turtleneck and his black pants, and he sits down here and he leans forward to the camera and he says, "The universe, the cosmos, all there ever was, all there ever is, and all there ever will be." How the fuck does he know that? What arrogance to say something like that and try to get me to believe it, when he has no way of knowing. This is what the people who, here's the problem. When you're the smartest person, when you're in the smartest person in the room, who's going to challenge you? When Carl Sagan walks into the room, okay, I grant he's the smartest person in the room, but that doesn't mean he's not an idiot. Comparatively speaking, he's just a smarter monkey, as they say. There's a book called the Bob Universe, Bobiverse.
The key organizer of RadFest, a friend of mine, a man named Jim Stroll, and he often uses the term immortalism. But he does know that
I told him to stop using that because nobody likes that. Nobody likes that.
Eternity. There's a little bit of poetic license there. But it can be quite frustrating, and it certainly also, that specific instance can shut down the conversation for people. Yes,
it does, because you shouldn't use the word. People start rolling their eyes. So I'm going to live.
Well, there's a few terms. What's your preferred term?
Rejuvenation, because people don't mind that. They don't expect that. But if you say aging or anti-aging, or if you say particularly, I'm going to live forever, you're going to turn off the conversation. You go to somebody, you go talk to a taxi driver, you go talk to a waitress, you go talk to your next door neighbor. Say, I'm going to live forever. They're going to think you're a kook. And you've talked to them about 4 or 5 seconds when they start looking at their watch and saying, I've got to go rake the leaves, something like that. When you start talking about aging or anti-aging, well, they'll keep their people's attention for, a minute, half a minute maybe. But if you talk about rejuvenation, a lot of times you bypass all of that, and you go back and talk something else. People are willing to listen to that for maybe 3 to 5 minutes maybe. So I talked to Mr. Stroll about that. I seem to agree with you on that.
Yes. It's context specific.
Yeah.
We've had some interesting conversations here. You gave this example of elegant example of a turtle, and this same thing might be true of myself.
Yeah, just because you can't tell doesn't make it so.
If I can replace every single element of my body piecemeal over time, am I still Ben? Are you still Tom?
Or doing it every time you take a piss, so
yes.
you lose part of you. If you believe in that, see, you're not your atoms, you're your patterns. That's what people don't believe. Is that what you are? You isn't your skin or your patterns or your atoms. So you can't take your ashes and go bury them in my home country. You're not those ashes. You're the pattern that made up the ashes. So when they burned you in your crematorium, that was it. You were gone. Your ashes are still there, but that was never you.
But people often say this: if I concern myself too much with sustaining my qualia or my consciousness, that might be a little bit of a strange thing. Every night, I go to sleep, and qualia is suspended. That's a little death of a kind, conceivably.
Yeah.
Now, but
yeah, that's right.
Let's continue.
Where's your consciousness go when you're asleep?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you dream, here's another thing that's a bad is things that, oh, I had a dream, and in my dream I was doing stuff. I remember my dream, but you don't remember it until you wake up, and then you remember being consciousness when you were unconscious, but you were never conscious when you were asleep. And that's the trick that your brain is playing on you, is that you don't remember and think about your dreams until you're awake, and your brain is telling that you were conscious when you were dreaming, but you weren't. And so,
all right, I have another Google for you.
Yeah.
So some years from now, you believe it's happening. Some years from now, we'll have whole brain emulation. So you can have another Tom. He lives on a Google server.
There's a science fiction novel called We Are Bob.
Yeah,
very fun. It's just that's the concept that we do.
We talked about the rights of chatbots. If they can be convincing enough, they should at least have the rights, maybe, of a cockroach.
Yeah.
What is this shadowy Tom living on a Google server? Where do you put him on civil rights relative to yourself? Close to yourself, or pretty far down the list?
It depends on, I suppose, what the elites want. That would be the final determining answer. I don't get to decide. He doesn't get to decide. He's not president yet. So.
Yeah. We have a few years to figure this out or not figure it out.
Yeah,
but
I just don't think. Yeah, it's only what the elites want that's really going to make it happen. Currently.
So what do you think the elites want?
Whatever makes them money and keeps them elite is what they want. It's the selection process, natural selection. So, do they have rights? What I think is going to be interesting is that we do seem to be extending rights outward to other species and to like pigs and gorillas and dolphins and that sort of thing. So I guess it would be natural at some point with like the Blade Runner series. It was kind of interesting where we're making people and they're going to be very essentially possibly conscious. So I think basically consciousness is where it happens. But the problem is that any entity, any animal that shows emotion is conscious.
Yes.
Because emotion is there to control your consciousness. The only reason that you have emotion is to control your consciousness. And it's a control mechanism where your genetics control your consciousness. So you can tell if something's conscious, but simply if it doesn't have emotion. If it does, then it's conscious.
It seems to be the consensus among people who study the mechanics of minds about the creatures, and neuroscientists of this kind, that more and more so that they're believing that every single creature of any kind, the cockroach, the amoeba, the amoeba before, they all have some sort of proto-consciousness by our standards, and so the Jain religion is a religion that describes a little bit what you described a moment ago. This doing no harm to other creatures. It seems that we might be moving in that direction as a civilization when we're seeing things like lab-grown meat replacing farming. When we're seeing things like this monkey that we described, that's an incredible story. I don't know if you probably remember the story of Coco and Washoe, these gorillas and chimps that learned sign language. They captivated the popular imagination.
Finger off later.
But they captivated the popular imagination
until the finger.
Right.
Kind of
But you can imagine something like this happening with uplifted creatures. A reality show that becomes a great obsession with people.
What is it about humans that they like animals better than people?
Okay.
I mean, what is that about? I guess it's about setting up your own elite little group, maybe. I don't know, but it seems to be a little bit anomalous to me.
I think it's a certain degree of feature of idealism and shattered idealism. We can't live in a perfect world,
so we buy a pet.
tend to flit.
God bless pet owners. I like pet owners. I like dogs.
Yeah. Hey, there was a pet
And
longevity
cats.
panel today at Redfest. What did you think about that?
I think it's an end run around the FDA because the FDA doesn't have any say over what veterinarians do. And in most states, you can do experiments on animals without any credentials whatever. In Nevada, for example, you can set up your own practice so long as you say you're doing it for science, and no one's going to stop you. And so I think it's simply an end run around the FDA. If they didn't have the FDA, or the FDA, took care of supervised veterinary science, then it wouldn't exist. So the only reason that's there is because the FDA is really blocking a lot of what is being done to develop new science in this area. And so if you can do it on a pet, they can't stop you. You can take develop those techniques and those things that actually work in affecting science or longevity. And then once you get it working on a dog or a cat or whatever, then you can take that science and then very quickly apply it to humans. And that's the whole idea, is an invasion of the FDA. And Church, I think George Church said as much.
Yes. That's definitely someone who I'd like to see at a future Radfest event. George Church. I know he's an incredibly busy man, but he certainly has
got a good book out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there any other engineering concepts of some rarefied form that you'd like to describe for us as we're wrapping up?
Well, we talked about the end of biological life. So I think did we cover that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
you're all fucked part of it.
Right. And it describes an omega point where all of humanity is singing in harmony as we have connectivity beyond anything that we can currently
exit,
do.
And you can tell the starting point of this is everybody's on their phone right now, and the computer time I think keeps climbing, and at some point you're going to be wanting to transition into the computer, through some sort of portal like virtual reality, and the virtual reality going to be taking over, and then you go to work through virtual reality. I mean, literally going through work. That's probably what's going to happen in the 1930s, where rather than actually commute to your job, you will pretend to commute to your job somehow, and then you're there, and everybody sees everybody just as if you were actually there, and then you don't have to go into work. Well, that'd be a big improvement. That then you can do things so much more quickly, and once you're there, that you're going to want to stay there for a large period of time. So that's a transition starting.
So positing 10 plus years from now, a full telepresence.
Yeah, full telepresence, and why go to work then unless you have to move things around? Then you could have an avatar do it for you anyway. So you have robotics going, and you have telepresence like we just mentioned. Then you could simply go into an avatar like that and then just do whatever you want to do. You don't even have to if you have maybe a coworker that's not so attractive, you could make them more attractive in your virtual world. You would be more attractive.
Speaking of lovely folks,
yeah.
And on this subject, my friend Natasha Wiedemore spoke on this subject at some length.
Really? Oh yeah, I missed that.
Yeah. She talked about the research that she'd done in talking about protocols for cyborgization, and but there's another gentleman named Dmitry Iskov. He's a Russian billionaire, Leeds, who's spending quite a lot of money on avatar systems and cyborgization of different kinds.
Cool. Russian avatars.
Yeah. But the numbers that you were saying of 1930 for human beings experiencing this, it doesn't seem too far off the mark.
No, I think probably have 5G or whatever it is that gives us the informational transfer capability to make that done, and then that's going to be another transition point. Like the internet's going to be just basically blow up again to much bigger positions we have now, and then telepresence, and then not having to go into work to go to work and have a meeting with your boss, just like he's standing right there. You can't even really tell when he's not there. You could probably hand him a piece of paper and it looks like he's taking it, so it's going to be an easy transition.
So we have this new sphere growing, and then we have folks who want to continue living as maybe is their right in the way that they traditionally have. You mentioned So one thing that people like Elon Musk and many others, 100 friends of ours, talk about is going off world. these
Good idea.
post-humans,
Good idea.
these people who are using advanced algorithms in ways that might be at cross purposes with those socially conservative folks.
That's a good point.
Leading the planet.
Bring back this. There's a science fiction series that's called We Are Bob. It's one where they have all these Bobs that replicate themselves electronically. And in that book, one of the themes, one of the books which I really like, is that the Mormons have this revelation where they say, okay, we're going to go to this other planet. And they all take off, and all the Mormons, not all of them, but a great number of them take off and start populating this other planet. So I thought it was pretty cute to put that Mormonism into a science fiction novel, because it's really kind of novel and new.
And
likely,
folks,
and possibly too.
and folks, if you are interested in post-humanism,
I like Mormons, by the way.
there's a smart group.
I'm not making
There's
fun
a
of Mormons.
smart group.
I like Scientology.
The
I like
Mormon,
Mormons.
the Mormon Transhumanist
I like Catholics.
Association. They're talking about these things in quite realistic terms. One of the smartest groups of religious syncretists on the planet, the Mormon Transhumanist Association.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
If you
I haven't heard of that.
If you you can make a study of their YouTube channel and videos, and many of the things that you're describing here are gamed out quite elegantly.
By Mormons?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Mormon
I'm
Life
impressed.
Extensions.
I'll have to watch that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good group. I interviewed and did some panels with their founder and Lincoln Cannon and some
Really?
others from their group.
I had not heard of that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. I'm always very interested in how these traditions might tend to merge or come into conflict with technological.
It's going to be this next decade is going to be a real workout. It's going to be fascinating.
We are on the razor's edge for a few years, perhaps.
I don't know why I call it the razors. That sounds unpleasant. It's going to be a pleasant ride. It'll end up be fuck, but it'll be fun all the way through.
The humanist would agree. That the human race is fucked.
Yeah.
The transhumanist might take a different point of view on that.
Yeah.
Yes. Fascinating. Tom, thanks for doing this, pal.
Oh, yeah, it was
I had a
fun.
good time.